Are you going to join me on this video? Hang out, watch some lore? You going to watch some lore with us? You don't have to. Hello everybody, it's me again, your pal. Welcome back to another video, and we are going to go through the lore of the bosses of Dark Souls 3 from our fine friend VaatiVidya. I don't have much else to say. Let's just get into it.
The stories of Souls games have always revolved around bosses, but that statement has never been more true than for Dark Souls 3. If you understand who you're killing in this game, then you will understand the story. The first one in your way is Udex Gundyr.
I will say it was much easier to follow the story in this one compared to the last two games.
The Ashen Judge and scabbard to the coiled sword of the shrine. This sword is bequeathed only to chosen Ash who can best him in battle. But before he was the Ashen Judge, Gundyr walked through this place much like we did, on his way to meet his Firekeeper and link the fire. Charged with a duty and granted a cast iron halberd that would never crumble, Gundyr arrived, late, greeted by a shrine without fire and a bell that would not toll. The flame had already faded, and his Firekeeper had been thrown into the depths of the bell tower, grave of Firekeepers past.
I knew that actually, that the Gundyr we fought in the Dark Firelink was actually one that had never got to his Firekeeper. So essentially he was soul level 1 and kicked my ass. So imagine if he was allowed to level up a little bit, how much harder he would have been.
She never met her champion, and the ensuing tragic farce became a favorite tale of the masses. And after he was bested by an unknown warrior, which is probably us, Gundyr the champion became sheathed to a coiled sword in the hopes that someday the first flame would be linked once more.
Wait, so this was another time thing then? Kind of like the last giant in Dark Souls 2. So that tutorial boss was actually a boss we somehow, because of how weird time is, we've fought him before and now we fight him again, corrupted. Because that's all the pus, right? The pus of man. So he's corrupted after the ages.
Perhaps Gundyr, with his unbreakable halberd, was fated to eternal service from the beginning. Since it's implied that Gundyr expected to meet a Firekeeper, he was likely meant as a candidate for linking the fire.
Damn, that
Those
parry.
capable of linking the fire are named Lords of Cinder, beings capable of bringing back the world from the brink of darkness by linking the first flame. Indeed, the game speaks of 3 Lords of Cinder who have already linked the fire, and they're being resurrected as a last resort to link it once again. In the opening cutscene, you saw them: Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, Yorm the Giant, and Farron's Abyss Watchers. Each of these lords once had an age of their own, and the remnants of their age lives on in Dark Souls 3 and in their resurrection. For example, Aldrich is linked to these bosses and their stories, the Abyss Watchers are linked here, and those in Lothric are conjoined here. For simplicity's sake, we're going to discuss these stories in 3 chunks, starting with Aldrich, Pontiff Sullivan, Vort, and the Dancer, who all reside in the Boreal Valley. The Boreal Valley is currently ruled over by Pontiff Sullivan, a tyrant who sends his Outrider Knights to serve as his watchful eyes and his guards. And the first knight of Pontiff Sullivan we meet is Vort, an Outrider Knight who ambushes us as we attempt to leave Lothric. So the Outrider Knight's job is to keep an eye on things. Sullivan's knights are also described as his watchful eyes and his punitive blades. Each Outrider Knight is provided with a ring by the Pontiff, which transforms them into frenzied beasts and lures them into battles of death. Specifically, the 2 main Outrider Knights we see upon the high wall of Lothric appear at both points of progression in the area, so perhaps they serve as strategically placed guards in order to hinder our progression, and for Sullivan to keep an eye on the world. When you went through Irithyll, I'm sure you noticed those ghosts that seem to be walking the streets. Well, they likely represent the Outrider Knights before their departure and descent into madness, because 2 in particular are very interesting. They walk together, 1 man, 1 female, and the woman wears the mask of the Dancer. Vort was never far from the fleeting Dancer, who watches over Emma in Lothric's Grand Cathedral. The Dancer is far more intriguing than Vort is. The Pontiff ordered her to serve as a dancer, and then he ordered her to serve as his outrider knight. He bestowed enchanted swords upon her, one dark and one light, mirroring his own. Eventually, the black eyes of the pontiff transformed her into a beastly creature, her gauntlets fusing with her own hide. The fascinating thing about the dancer, though, is who she was before she became Sullivan's pet. It's a very popular theory that she is one of the 3 daughters of Guinevere who appear in-game. Here's the evidence. Her aurora veil is said to be an article of the old gods, which is permitted only for direct descendants of the old royal family. The dancer's soul can also be transposed to give you the spell Soothing Sunlight, miracle of Guinevere of the old royalty. Guinevere used to reside in Anor Londo, home of the gods, and her line continues in Lothric. So Guinevere was also revered as a goddess of fertility and bounty. She raised many heavenly children, and the dancer, having one of the 3 sunlight spells, is clearly one of them. And of course, as you know, Pontiff Sullivan...
I didn't put that together at all. I just saw the spell and I was like, yeah, it's one of Guinevere's. Did not put that together that she could have been a descendant.
The tyrant now rules over
daughter.
Irithyll and Anor Londo, so it's my belief that Sullivan gained power within Anor Londo, then proclaimed himself pontiff, and ordered Guinevere's daughter to serve as his dancer, and then outrider knight. The royal family was usurped and devoured and torn apart by Sullivan, who, Yorshka says, wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff. Even after the family's passing, the Silver Knights looked over their manor and the ruined cathedral. The story behind Pontiff Sullivan's rise to power is told lightly, with only clues peeking above the surface, but in a nutshell, I believe Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, probably with the help of the Deacons of the Deep. The only ones in his way were the Dark Moon Knights.
The Dark Moon Knights were once led by my elder brother, the Dark Sun Gwyndolin, but he was stricken by illness, and leadership of the Knights fell to me. Then Sullivan wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff, and took me prisoner. Oh, where could my dear brother be?
So when I say that Pontiff Sullivan took over Anor Londo from within, it is speculation on my part, but my reasoning is that he knew of Gwyndolin, and he knew of Yorshka, and he wrongfully proclaimed himself pontiff, which all imply that he was a part of the system already. A pontiff is essentially a high priest, and the miracles, the weaponry, and the rings of the Dark Moon all rely on faith. Additionally, there's a bit more evidence that the pontiff was a part of the Dark Moon system already. The sword in his left hand is a ceremonial sword representing the judgment of the moon. However, its magic is far closer to sorcery than any existing lunar power. Its dark blue hues, deeper than the darkest moon, reflect Sorcerer Sullivan's true nature. Yorshka calls Sullivan a tyrant, which can mean someone who elects themselves ruler without legal right. This, along with his great sword of judgment that references the moon, furthers that idea that he took over from within, the figurehead of a movement that was abandoning their faith in favor of Sullivan's true calling, dark sorceries. And the same sort of shift was happening amongst the Deacons of the Deep, who we find all throughout Anor Londo. Originally, though, they were a group of clergymen dedicated to sealing away the potential horrors of the deep. Deep protection tells us that the deep was originally a peaceful and sacred place, its deacons wearing dark red robes denoting their blessing of fire. Over time, however, the deep became the final rest for many abhorrent things.
God, that thing is so weird.
Indeed, human dregs were likely some of those things, as the dregs of humanity are said to sink to the lowest depths imaginable, forming the bedrock of the world. Those who linger too long on the brink of the deep will often slip, and lurking within the deep are insects which tear open the skin and burrow into flesh. Eventually, those dedicated to sealing away the horrors of the deep succumb to its very power. An example of this is their Tome of Knowledge, which was originally intended to teach divine protection, but it had dark tales added to its pages, making it a thing most profane. And along with this descent, presumably, was Aldrich, Saint of the Deep.
Such a cool
right
area.
And proper cleric. Only he developed a habit of devouring men. He ate so many that he bloated like a drowned pig, then softened into sludge. So they stuck him in the Cathedral of the Deep, and they made him a Lord of Cinder, not for virtue, but for might.
Aldrich was this simple saint who became a hugely powerful being, eventually chosen, maybe willingly and maybe not, to become a Lord of Cinder and link the fire.
Bright and early.
The deacon's skirt tells us that the deacons tended to the flame, and I'm perhaps inclined to believe that this meant that maybe they were tending to the flame of Aldrich when he was a Lord of Cinder. And whether this is true or not, we do know that the deacons eventually succumbed to the horror.
Damn, I did not look up in this room, and I regret it. Holy crap, look at that.
Of the deep, and neither tending to the flame nor the faith could save them. You would have noticed that many deacons cast Dark Soul sorceries, which were imparted to them by Archdeacon MacDonald, an adherent of Aldrich who was largely responsible for the corruption of the deacons. Archdeacon MacDonald delighted in the cathedral's stagnating souls. For him, they represented the glorious bedrock of this world. Under the guidance of Archdeacon MacDonald, these deacons became both clergymen and sorcerers. The Archdeacon's sin, as it's called, was to channel faith for sorcery, which transformed his staff from a symbol of religious authority into a catalyst of dark sorceries. The deacons, they still had faith, but it was not in fire any longer. It was in Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, their master. Upon his resurrection, Aldrich, like many Lords of Cinder, ruminated on the fading of the fire. For him, it inspired visions. He saw beyond the age of fire to the age of deep waters, and the coming age of the deep sea. Filled with new purpose, he knew what he had to do. He would devour the gods himself. When we get to the Deacons of the Deep, we expect to find Aldrich in his coffin, but he's already left for his home in the Boreal Valley. The deacons here are led by Archdeacon Royce, who is one of the 3 archdeacons who remained behind to keep eternal watch over his master's coffin, hoping that one day he would return. Aldrich left behind a small doll in his coffin that Pontiff Sullivan gave to his most valued subjects. Wherever you go, the moon sets in Irithyll. Wherever you may be, Irithyll is your home. When Aldrich left, Archdeacon MacDonald went with him. We come across MacDonald in the depths of an
What's that pup doing? Why is it praying?
Orlando, and MacDonald, like many other deacons, is obese. He's huge, and I see that as a legacy of Aldrich, who derived power from gluttony. They're clearly mimicking him.
Yeah.
In Anor Londo, Archdeacon MacDonald came to lead the Aldrich faithful, who are defenders, who exist to ensure that Aldrich, devourer of gods, remains undisturbed. And when we come across Aldrich, we realize why he wants to be undisturbed. Because Pontiff Sullivan, with a devourer of gods by his side, has imprisoned a god of the old royalty in the abandoned cathedral to be fed to the devourer. Gwyndolin, son of Gwyn and prior leader of the Dark Moon Knights, was gradually devoured by Aldrich. As Aldrich slowly devoured the god of the Dark Moon, he dreamt. In this dream, he saw the form of a young, pale girl in hiding, and we know this is Yorshka, who was sister to Gwyndolin, and a half-breed who is parallel to Priscilla from Dark Souls 1. But the interesting thing about this is the dream that Aldrich had, because apparently Aldrich only needs to dream about someone to learn their skills, for he uses Priscilla's life hunt scythe in battle. And this fact that he can learn things through his visions has some interesting implications, because Aldrich is clearly wielding a Gravelord greatsword upon the end of his spear, which lends credit towards this theory that Aldrich...
Well, look at I'm pointing at the screen, but the weird textured, feathery looking thing that looks like a skirt around Gwyndolin, it looks like Nito. It's Nito's showl or whatever you want to call it.
Has devoured Nito in some capacity.
Yeah, you can even see all the skeletons of Nito right there.
He is
yeah, see all that? Why am I pointing?
called the Devourer of Gods, plural, after all. So another question becomes, did Aldrich also devour Nito? Well, he has the wispy Nito-like cloak with skulls within it,
Okay.
but I think it's more likely that these skulls are just remnants of other humans that he's devoured.
No, I wholly disagree. As someone who has had their hand in the industry for as long as I have, that is a specific design choice. I believe that means it was Nito.
You have to remember there is no concrete evidence that he has devoured Nito, and I personally think it's more likely that he simply dreamt up the Gravelord spell in a similar manner to which he dreamt up the Life Hunt scythe.
Well, I don't know about that because we killed Gwendolyn in our run. There is some chronological sense to these games, and time has gone on. The fire cycles, but it's not like reality cycles, right? So where would Nito be? Like, Gwendolyn still exists and is now being eaten by Aldrich. That means Nito would have existed. And where's Nito? Not killed by us because we killed Gwendolyn. So that makes more sense to me that he ate Nito, given how this is all unwrapping.
From Yoshka. But what you think shapes the story here, so let me know. So that's all of the Pontiff's lackeys explained for the most part, and the biggest unanswered questions here to go into in other videos is what exactly the relationship between Salavan and the deacons is, and in what order this story of corruption and treachery played out, because timeline is always one of the hardest things to get right in the Soul series.
It is.
But the biggest curiosity, in my opinion, and the one that really, really interests me, are Aldrich's visions of the age of the deep sea. From a being, remember, that has visions so accurate he can learn spells from those visions. So, in a franchise that's entirely self-contained within this age of fire and its cycles, this vision of the deep sea, it's pretty much the only mention of a different future. And its appearance in these descriptions feels so out of place that I almost expect it to be referenced in the future in some capacity, assuming it's not just a reference to Bloodborne.
I was about to
Maybe this
say.
indicates what Miyazaki is doing next on one of his projects, or...
I was going to say it is definitely a callback to Bloodborne in some manner, because how this realities and universes are all intertwined, and we do have the Bloodborne guy. I feel like that is like his visions stepping out through a universe into another and seeing the deep sea from Bloodborne. I can't remember what it was about. It's just a Carol rune. I forget what the lore was to do with the deep sea stuff. Transcript from the Great Ones and human blah blah blah. The rune means deep sea and grants serve as a bulwark guarding sleep and augur of the eldritch truth. I don't know how the callback would work, but I agree. It seems like a vision of Bloodborne's universe, if that makes sense.
Maybe we'll see something related to this in the DLC.
Nope.
Moving on. Something set Sullivan down this path. When Sullivan was a young sorcerer, he discovered the profaned capital, and down there he discovered an unfading flame below a distant tundra of Irithyll, and when he found this, a burning ambition took root within him. The profaned flame. The origins of it aren't known, but we do know a few things. We know it's an unfading flame, we know that it can be manipulated, and we know that it swallows the hearts of those who wield it. The Pontiff himself imbued his greatsword with this fire, and he also gave it to his holy knights. Shortly after he did this, the fire witches had their hearts swallowed by the flame. And as one last example of its corrupting influence, the handmaidens who wield it down in the profaned capital, their dagger says that they take pleasure in wounding others, and
Yeah, I remember that.
the Pontiff himself doesn't exactly have a very good moral compass. But apart from that, we know precious little about the profaned flame, and this has been the hardest part of the script to write for me, because the profaned flame defies all categorization as flames that have existed previously in the series. So I'm going to work on my theories on it, and while I'm doing that, I'll list those theories in the description, because I could talk about this thing for a very long time without actually getting anywhere. But the final thing, and maybe the most important thing we know about the profaned flame, is that Yorm the Giant became a Lord of Cinder to put it to rest. Now, clearly, Yorm was not successful, because the profaned flame has infiltrated almost all of Irithyll and set a lot of events in motion. This just adds even more tragedy to Yorm's tale. Yorm is the descendant of an ancient conqueror, and was asked by the very people once subjugated to lead them. Serving as both a weighty blade and a stone-hard shield, Yorm fought unflinchingly as a one-man vanguard, but one day he lost the one he wished to protect. In response, he threw down his great shield and added a left-handed notch to his machete instead, so he could two-hand it, for he no longer had anything left to protect. All the while, his human subjects appeared quite disrespectful of him. They were insincere when they called him a lord, and they doubted him. He is called Lonely Yorm in his cinders, and perhaps that's because he lost the one he wished to protect, or perhaps because he didn't have the love of his people. At some point, the profaned flame became a real problem in the capital, for according to his cinders, Yorm decided to sacrifice himself and become a Lord of Cinder to put the profaned flame to rest. I don't know why Yorm decided that, hey, I'm gonna put out fire with fire, because when he did this, fire rained down from the sky and incinerated naught but human flesh. This is an interesting insight into who the linking of the fire consumes. It consumed humans, and humans alone, and you see their disfigured, smelted corpses all around Yorm's chamber. Before he linked the fire, however, Yorm left behind 2 storm rulers, which was a legendary greatsword, also known as the Giant Slayer, for the residual strength of storm that brings giants to their knees. So this thing could kill giants, and one he gave to the humans who doubted him. He called them out on their cowardly words and gave them a weapon capable of killing him. And the other storm ruler he gave to a dear friend in return for a promise. This dear friend was Sigurd, who journeys to the profaned capital in order to uphold his promise and slay his old friend. Presumably, Yorm asked Sigurd to kill him if he ever betrayed his duty, and Sigurd does so, seeing that Yorm has not returned to link the fire once again. The profaned capital also had its sorcerers, who claimed heirship to the legacy of the renowned scholar Big Hat Logan, even going so far as to emulate the type of staff he used. But halfway across the world, I know of 2 crystal sages who emulated him even more closely. These crystal sages served as spiritual guides to the scholars of Lothric's Grand Archives, and one of them went on to ally with the Undead Legion. The Undead Legion of Farron was a caravan of undead, dedicated to the eradication of the Abyss wherever it was found. The Abyss Watchers, as they were called, follow the duty and the form of the Wolf Knight of Dark Souls 1, known as Artorias the Abyss Walker. They are essentially his legacy. They made their home in Farron Keep, and high above Farron Keep lies an emaciated old wolf. The Abyss Watchers, for their hunting of the Abyss, they required some art that went beyond any existing art. Wolf's Blood, the legacy of Artorias, provided just that. Their pointed steel helm became shirked as this sinister omen by the masses, because, think about it, if you saw that pointed steel helmet coming towards your kingdom, you knew you were in trouble, because these guys are dedicated to taking out the Abyss. And indeed, their home in Farron might just be set above such a kingdom, for below are the catacombs of Karthus, and sealed within a goblet, deep below in the catacombs, is the encounter with High Lord Wolnir, a ruler who succumbed to the Abyss. Before succumbing to the Abyss, Wolnir was a conqueror. He ruled over the people of Karthus of the Sands, formidable warriors who were masters of the curved sword, and also of pyromancies that enhanced the effectiveness of their curved swords. The swordsmen attached great value to victory at all costs, for where was the honor in death? They lived for their High Lord Wolnir, who was conqueror of most lands known to their people, and yeah, you can see why they loved him. In Wolnir's time, there were other lords who had their crowns rightfully bequeathed upon them, but Wolnir brought them to their knees and ground their crowns to dust, forming his own crown from theirs, for he was the one High Lord, keen to outlive all others. Reminds me a lot of what we did in Dark Souls 2. Anyway, Somehow, Wolnir himself fell to the abyss, and he was gripped by this fear of true darkness, and he pleaded to the gods for the first time. In our boss fight with him, there is a darkness below Wolnir, and it's struggling to consume him. But Wolnir had his holy sword, and he had 3 armlets which he had stripped from the corpses of clerics, and
Whoa.
these things gave him some semblance.
Did he bring that out when I fought him? Because I did not see that at all. That was cool. I didn't actually see that sword. That is really cool. Does he? I hope he explains why he's like this massive dude and whatever. He's massive.
Of comfort. Of course, we destroy the bracelets, and the abyss finally consumes him.
Oh no.
While he was in the abyss, however, Wolnir was not inactive. Black Serpent is this pyromancy that was discovered from the abyss by Wolnir.
Like, he was massive. And Yorm's a giant. And the giants are named giants because they're massive, but he was bigger than Yorm. So why was he massive? What's the lore reason for that?
Which went on to inspire the black arts of his Grave Wardens. The Grave Warden Pyromancy Tome was developed by his Grave Wardens who discovered his pyromancies. And going back up for a second, Wolnir and the Abyss, their proximity to the Abyss Watchers probably isn't coincidence. In fact, it makes quite a lot of sense for Karthus to be one of the kingdoms that the Abyss Watchers toppled. So let's go back up to the Abyss Watchers for a second and see if this theory holds any weight. Eventually, the Abyss Watchers became Lords of Cinder. Their shed wolf's blood served their mandate as lords. Essentially, it met the requirements. To gain access to the Abyss Watchers, you have to extinguish 3 flames, and I always wondered why this ritual existed. It felt very video gamey.
I hope there's a reason for those pictures. I was looking at that and I didn't know what and why, but I felt like they meant something.
And out of place, but I went through once more recently, and I looked really closely at the engravings behind each flame.
Yes.
One looks like the 4 kings, one looks like Nito, and one looks like the Bed of Chaos, 3 of the main lords in Dark Souls 1, and these were the souls you had to collect to gain access to Gwyn and open a giant stone door. So these are likely here to symbolize that, right? We're extinguishing 3 flames, and we're opening the door that explains the ritual. Anyway, that's more a piece of trivia than anything. After the Legion's Watchers became Lords of Cinder, the wolf blood dried up, and Farron was consumed by a festering wood. Dark wraiths began to roam, the keep fell to ruins, and, as suggested by many of you in my lore through, the Abyss Watchers, upon being resurrected to link the fire once more, may have been affected by the Abyss as well. So here's the theory. The Abyss Watchers were driven to seek out the Abyss, right? Well, what if, upon their resurrection, the Abyss far below in the catacombs of Karthus crept into the Abyss Watchers themselves? This would explain why the Abyss Watchers are locked into endless combat with themselves, because they're driven to seek out the Abyss, but they also can't die, so they're locked into endless combat. When I read this theory in the comments, something else clicked as well. The Wolf Knight armor, which belonged to Artorias, who fell to the Abyss, says that the armor of the Abyss Watchers suggests their own eventual end. So the game is drawing a parallel here between Artorias and the Abyss Watchers. It's saying that the armor of the Abyss Watchers shows that they're falling to the Abyss as well. And here's the really interesting thing. When you look closely at their armor, you realize it has black tendrils of the Abyss rising up. So the armor is showing us that they fell to the Abyss. Probably. This theory isn't concrete, and no one should take it as such, but I think it's the best explanation for their infighting. It's my favorite explanation, anyway. And mostly, this one was all you guys, so thank you.
I figured they were overtaken by the Abyss to some extent, because they had black tendrils all over them.
The Knights of Lothric were hunters of dragons, explaining their affinity with lightning and why they worshipped the sun. They have since tamed dragons, and with their drakes, they once crushed anything that threatened their shores. The knight has served as one of the 3 pillars of Lothric since ancient times, and it shares place alongside the wyverns as a symbol of Lothric. However, tales of dragon slayers are now a rare thing, and they're told only in fragments and whispers in remote regions. The Dragonslayer armor lost its master long ago, but it still remembers the sporting hunts they shared together. When we fight against it, the armor retains its master's fighting style, but now it has a new master, the Pilgrim Butterfly. Now, the soul of the Dragonslayer armor is the only mention of these butterfly creatures, so speculation abounds whenever you talk about them. When you look up at them closely, though, closer than the game intends you to ever get, you'll see that they're flesh and bone, and they're almost bent backwards with a ribcage jutting outwards. Now, their name is one of the biggest clues that we have, and the word pilgrim makes me think of the pilgrims of Londor, who all died on their way to the peak of Lothric. And just like these pilgrim butterflies fly upwards to the peak of Lothric as well. And in both these cases, with the pilgrims and the pilgrim butterflies, we have no real idea why either of them are going up. So perhaps we'll learn more if we ever get Londor-themed DLC, and I think that's pretty likely. I'm going to list 2 other theories in the description about the butterflies, because the bottom line is we don't know what they are. Next is the arc.
Again, I really hope they do release some sort of Bible someday that has like the entirety of the lore spelled out for everyone. Because to this day, I don't understand why any of this really happened. Like the first flame, why did that happen? You know, it was just dragons, crags, and gray eternal. Why did the flame start? And why was the flame found by the lords? Like Gwyn, where did Gwyn come from if it was just a bunch of dragons? Now, I've watched all these lore things, and I don't know if it went over my head, but it was never really explained where everything came from. Like, I know humans were always hollows. Hollows is the original state of humans, so we were just scattered around. But were the lords like Gwen and stuff? Were they like a different type of human that were wandering around and came upon the fire? I don't know. I like it. I really wish there was like some sort of, you know, like official lore that explains how and why. Or if it's just on purpose why it's all just obscure. You know?
And beyond the archives is Prince Lothric and his brother, Lorien.
I didn't realize I was
Curiously,
bed up top.
these are the only Lords of Cinder who were not featured in the opening cutscene of Lords being resurrected, and I believe that's because they never linked the fire. And I think their rejection of linking the fire might have been what set all of the desperate resurrections into motion.
That makes sense.
This is just a theory, but I think it's backed up by most of these descriptions and this dialogue.
Prince Lothric is in your hands. Please save his soul. Tell him what he must be, a lord.
So, there's Prince Lothric and Lorien, his brother. Lorien is the eldest, and before he was crippled, he was a knight who single-handedly slayed a demon prince, the victory eternally scorching his sword with flame. The Cinders of a Lord state that the Lothric bloodline was obsessed with creating a worthy heir. They needed someone to link the flame, and for some reason Prince Lorien did not suffice. So they put their faith in their next born, Prince Lothric, as his throne states, last hope of his line. Prince Lothric, destined to be a Lord of Cinder, was born into swaddling clothes used in ancient prayer, and they are all that he has ever worn. He was cherished by the royal family, despite being born into illness, a frail and shriveled child. He was their last hope, and meant to be a champion, but some things will remain distant dreams forever. Linking the fire proved impossible, so the family resorted to unspeakable means. Descriptions don't say or imply what these unspeakable means are, so that's up to us to guess at. But after mentioning these unspeakable means, the Cinder description goes on to say that the path to linking the fire is a cursed one indeed. So Prince Lothric was cursed. With what, we don't know, but Lorien embraced his brother's curse, leaving him mute and crippled. It is said that Lorien, the one who embraced the curse, did so willingly and embraced his fate. When we kill Lorien in the boss fight, Lothric resurrects him, saying, "For that is our curse." So maybe being unable to die itself is the fire-linking curse, and why he says,
You remain. among the accursed.
After becoming one, the soul of the twin princes says that they rejected their duty to become lords of Cinder and settled down far, far away to watch the fire fade from a distance. The curse has made their souls nearly inseparable. So, why did Lothric grow to despise and reject his duty as a lord of Cinder? Well, it's very likely due to a man named as the First of the Scholars. Soulstream says that he was alleged to be a private mentor of the royal prince, and that he doubted the linking of the fire. So it's very likely that this scholar was the one who made Lothric reject his fate as a lord of Cinder. And there is so much more to the tale of Lothric, but we don't have time.
I just realized there's a another statue of Kath right there.
I want to talk about the kingdom,
Or
about
Framp.
the royal family, but this video is only about the main bosses, so I still have to mention Osiris, King of Lothric, and his wife, the Queen, so please subscribe and look out for the optional bosses lore video.
He's circling it. So I was going
And
to say
the
something.
final main boss, the being we fight after the Firekeeper.
We watched this in my final, when we kill this guy, we watched this just to kind of make the episode a little bit longer because I destroyed him. So we don't need to watch that. He's got like an optional boss, so we'll do that one now. We'll finish up just watching the Nameless King. He has a bunch more about like Osiris and all that, but they're all kind of not relevant. I'll watch the Nameless one just because he was an impact for me. And also, he's pretty important lore boss.
Lord Gwyn's firstborn son was a god of war,
Yeah.
who inherited the sunlight from his
Yeah.
father. The power of sunlight is manifest as lightning, and it's highly effective against dragons. And Gwyn's firstborn son was once a dragon slayer who fought against his father's ancient enemy. And as you know, the ancient dragons once ruled over an age of grey, but Gwyn discovered their weakness and he struck them down with great bolts of lightning. Later, advancements in arms would lead to lightning-imbued spears with a cross pommel, which were developed to be stamped or thrust deep into the flesh of dragons. The firstborn's
Jeez.
dragon slayer sword spear was the first of such weapons, for the firstborn had respect only for arms and nothing else. At some point during the war, however, Gwyn's firstborn had a change of heart. He switched sides and sacrificed everything to ally himself with the ancient dragons. And unlike a lot of Souls lore, this part of history is actually described as missing for a reason, for after he sided with the ancient dragons, Lord Gwyn's firstborn was expunged from the annals of history, and his deific status was rescinded. He was no longer considered a god, no longer in the books of history, and today even his name is not known. If you played around the time that Dark Souls 1 was released, the identity of the Firstborn was a complete mystery to all of us.
Yeah.
All we knew was that he was Gwyn's firstborn, that he was a god of war, and that he was a core part of the Warriors of Sunlight.
And everyone thought it was Solaire.
So players puzzled over missing statues next to Gwyn, they puzzled over broken monuments to the Warriors of Sunlight, and we even guessed that the Firstborn himself could have just been a simple man from Astora who fought for the sun.
Yeah.
And it is true that the god of war continued to watch over his Sunlight warriors, but we can now finally see where he went and why. The Nameless King, firstborn son of Gwyn, heir of Sunlight and god of war, left the miracle Sunlight blade upon his father's coffin, perhaps as a final farewell. Now, this part of the Nameless King's history, it's been purposefully erased, but some players do think that traces of his existence still remain out in the world and cannot be erased. In fact, it's a popular theory, and I'll leave a link to a few sources in the description, that the Nameless King is referenced in the Faram armor set, which is this plate set that was named after a god of war. The mighty Lion Knights of Ferosa, worshippers of the war god Faram, wore heavy armor and were feared for their two-handed swordplay. This armor was blessed by the war god Faram. Ferosa would later fall to conflict with their neighbors, and the legacy of the Faram Knights fell with it, so the information here is also lacking. But is the Nameless King the war god Faram? Well, that's up to you to decide. Both are described as war gods, both place high value in arms. The Nameless King had to be king of some realm, and the Faram set is blessed and named after a god of war, who is possibly the one emblazoned upon the helm as a knight facing a dragon. Also, both the Nameless King and the kingdom of Ferosa fell from power, so hey, whatever you believe, this is a classic example of Souls leaving just enough clues that you can choose to believe or not choose to believe.
That's pretty
so
neat.
No one is provably right or wrong here. But moving on to what we do know.
Yeah, that does have credence to it because they did put the Faram set in the game. And everything has its place, not just because of callbacks and references. So, damn. Do you think that fits for me?
Nameless King tamed a storm drake, upon which he led a lifetime of battle. Assumedly, this partnership with the storm drake was a part of the Firstborn allying with the ancient dragons. I have a few suspicions that the storm drake might also be known as a giant horned Oni, which
It's a giant stupid chicken.
are found in eastern lands, as the Oni Slayer Great Arrow describes. And it's the only creature in the game that really fits the description of an Oni, whatever creature that is, and it's certainly a drake that looks very much like a foreign offshoot of most other Draconid creatures in Souls. It looks nothing like them, really. Oni are also found in an eastern land, and Ferosa is in an eastern land as well, so maybe there's something here, but just speculation. When the storm drake fell, the king claimed its soul, as was customary in the Age of the Gods. In a giant flash, we see the Nameless King become imbued with the drake's power of the storm, which is really reminiscent of Ornstein and Smo, absorbing one another in their boss fight in Dark Souls 1, as the Age of the Gods was drawing to a close there. Dark Souls 3's description of Smo's great hammer tells us that Smo was the last knight to remain at his post, guarding the ruined cathedral. Ornstein, on the other hand, he long guarded the ruined cathedral, but he left the land in search of the Nameless King. So you're probably asking yourself, how did Ornstein leave the cathedral if I killed him in Dark Souls 1 and then again in Dark Souls 2? Well, remember, Dark Souls 3 is the game that very openly references the fact that events are doomed to repeat themselves. More than any previous game, this is a game about cycles, and the Lords of Cinder who contributed to their own cycle. We see so many cycles laid before us, so yes, a lot of narratives and plots in the game have been recycled. In a way, that's what the games are about. But in Dark Souls 3, it's nice because a lot of these plots are further along than ever before. Take Ornstein, for example. In this timeline, he survived until he tired of standing around in a cathedral, and he left. For during this dragonless age where he stood in the cathedral, Ornstein the Dragon Slayer must have felt quite bereft of purpose, so he left in search of the Nameless King. So the question becomes, did he intend to kill the Nameless King, or did he intend to serve him? Ornstein's set in Dark Souls 1 describes Ornstein as the captain of the 4 knights of Lord Gwyn, but the Leo Ring of Dark Souls 3 describes him as the first knight of the Sun's eldest born, the Nameless King. So, since I find it hard to believe that he could be both the captain of the guard to Gwyn and simultaneously the first knight of the Firstborn, I think it's most likely that Ornstein abandoned his duty as captain of the guard and then decided to serve the Nameless King instead, after he was exiled. But the best evidence that Ornstein remained a friend to the Nameless King is the Sacred Oath description, which labels him as not just the Nameless King's first knight, but his faithful first knight. Since the game is clarifying something like this, then I'm going to believe that he is loyal to the Nameless King. So Ornstein tracks down and pledges allegiance to the Nameless King. But what becomes of Ornstein after his arrival in Archdragon Peak? We find his armor and his weapon after the Nameless King fight, but it's just discarded to the side. It's not upon a corpse, it's not in a chest, and this is strange for Souls, right? It stands out. I don't think there's many examples of this happening. So sure, it wouldn't make sense for the armor to be upon a corpse, but items like this are at least meant to be in chests. So to me, it signifies that Ornstein didn't want to preserve anything at all from his past, or perhaps that he discarded his armor in the same way that many people here do, to begin the transformation into a dragon. So, Is Ornstein alive? Is he dead? Was he killed by the Nameless King? Or did he become one of the dragons in the shrine? His fate is left open for you to decide. So we've mentioned...
It would be neat if they had like a specific dude meditating that gave an idea that it was him. Because it is strange that his armor and weapon are just kind of cast aside and there's just no evidence of where he went. I assume people scoured the place looking at every one of them to see if that was the case or not. So, I don't know.
The spell Sacred Oath before, and its description reads, Sacred Oath, a miracle devised by warriors of the sun, tells the tale of the sun's firstborn, his faithful first knight, and the brave dragon slayer who served them both. The brave dragon slayer who served them both. So a few dragon slayers could fit this description, but I think it's most likely that this was Havel. Havel the Rock was a battlefield compatriot of Gwyn, the First Lord. He was suited in this armor, carved from solid rock, and he wields the tooth of an everlasting dragon. Havel was followed by warriors who replicated his armaments and his weaponry and never flinched nor retreated from battle. Havel was the arch-enemy of Seath the Scaleless, which was the dragon who betrayed his own and allied with Lord Gwyn. This must have placed Havel in an awkward spot. He's a battlefield compatriot of Lord Gwyn, and yet Gwyn allied with a magic-wielding, traitorous dragon that Havel hates. In Dark Souls 1, it's implied that Havel was locked away by a dear friend, and all that time ago, we theorized that it was Gwyn himself who locked his hollowed friend away. We also talked about how a piece of occult weaponry was capable of killing the gods, and it was locked away in a basement with the rest of Havel's gear, and this fueled some theory that Havel plotted against the gods. In Lordran, Havel remained locked in that basement, but in Dark Souls 3, perhaps we see a different path to Havel's tale. We find armaments left by Havel himself in Archdragon Peak, and we can easily theorize that Havel was the dragon slayer mentioned in the tale of Sacred Oath. A brave dragon slayer, the keyword being brave, who never flinched or retreated from battle, and had good cause to take up arms with the Nameless King, who was another leader positioned to rebel against Gwyn and Seath the Scaleless. Of course, to play devil's advocate, Havel could also be there to slay the Nameless King. He is overlooking the corpse of an ancient dragon, after all, but as a final piece of proof that he's on the Nameless King's side, the half-dragon summoners, the ones with the frilly necks that summon phantoms to fight against you, they summon warriors of Havel to fight. Also, I want to point out that they summon a half-naked dude wielding Ricard's rapier and wearing a crown, so I'm assuming this is Ricard as well, and it links Prince Ricard to a king, it links him to the Way of the Dragon, and it links him to yet another castle full of half-dragon snake creatures. So, that is pretty much everything surrounding the Nameless King explained. So what do you believe? The story is really open-ended. And
it is.
I've given you most of the raw information you need to tell your own story. But regardless, now you know the story of Archdragon Peak, where the son of Gwyn switched sides, separated himself from the fire-linking fiasco, and assumedly quietly began rebuilding the ranks of the ancient dragons. So we just talked about how...
Yes. It definitely was their intention to leave everything open-ended. like I was saying earlier, like how it all just kind of began is just open-ended. Like there's no definitive reason why anything was or has been. All we know is what happened once the fire was claimed and the cycles began. But that's really interesting. I thought that the Havel we fought in Dark Souls 3 was actually him. I didn't think like he was partnering with, I thought he was going up there to kill them all. And the guy we found in Dark Souls 1 was just like a decoy or something. It wasn't the real Havel, because we do find his armor later, like his true armor. Or maybe that was a decoy also. But then we find Havel's armor where the stray demon was once we kill the one in Archdragon Peak. I don't know, man. It's so weird. It's so strange. Interesting tie-in with Ornstein, though. I didn't see that coming. And I like that he did pick up on the fact that there are people in Dark Souls 3 that we kill and they're here again. I don't like the idea that everything repeats itself. Like the cycles continue, but it's different civilizations through time that rise and fall. So why would in Dark Souls 3 they just repeat themselves? I feel like Dark Souls 3 is just the timeline continuing as if nothing happened from Dark Souls 1. That's what I would think, to kind of tie it all together kind of thing. Because they do speak of like Guinevere leaving and Orlando and stuff like that. Not that we kill her, but we kill her image that Gwendolyn makes, stuff like that. It's all very interesting, man. It's all very vague and left to interpretation, like Vaati says. Yeah, and I think it is their intention that we all make up our own idea of what the real story is and how it's supposed to end and everything like that. That's why I like to think that I ended it in my playthroughs, or I've been attempting to. I think I truly did end the cycle in my playthrough. The Firekeeper steals the flame and then I just kill her and I take it for myself. One could say that someone will come along and steal it from me, but please, the soul of Reginald and Scrotum as one. No one's stealing it back. This has truly been a ride, man, and we're not done. We do have the Prepare to Cry series next, where we talk about some more individuals and we get a little bit deeper into some of the lore. Like, we got the Nameless King one again. I don't know if we need to to watch that one, because he did talk in length about it. I'll look at it. If it is a little bit different, I'll include it in the video. But I'm interested to hear the Henri one. There is some repeated elements going on here in the Prepare to Cry. If it turns out that they are unique enough, I'll include it in the next video. But otherwise, yeah, man, as always, this lore is very befuddling and is very confusing and hard to follow. And, you know, I like hearing your guys' opinions on how this all fits together too. We have Vaati's ideas. I know there's a couple other people that have done lore videos and you've suggested me watching them. So if they do have an interesting idea themselves, please let me know in the comments, and let me know in the comments what you think and what your interpretation was. Yeah, it's very interesting. I don't know that there are many games that have this level of depth that is so open to interpretation like this while maintaining consistency, if that makes sense. It's all like everyone could have their own idea and it would technically be right because of how it's all presented. It's so interesting, and I have to wonder how Elden Ring holds up to all this too. I have to imagine Elden Ring's lore is just as convoluted, just as open-ended, and just as interesting. Whew. That was a lot to take in though. That was a lot. But that was another lore video done. We're just about done wrapping up the Dark Souls series here. We got one more video to do, the Prepare to Cry. I'll go ahead and do that now. And that's it. We're done. It's on to Elden Ring. So, ladies and gents, thanks again for watching. If you made it this far in the video, thank you so much. If you've been following my journey up to now, thank you also. It has been so much fun doing all this and learning so much about a game that I had no idea about until May of this year. And now it's consumed my life. It really has. Anyway, thanks again for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.